a small portion of our climate goals.
There has been a lot of information shared, misinformation as well. Looking forward to the opportunity to clarify some of that later on. Indeed, we're in the committee tomorrow. There's statements on Thursday. But ultimately, we have a massive challenge ahead. We've 450,000 hectares to plant between now and 2050. This Gresham House Fund represents 3,500 hectares, about 0.8%.
Colin Farrell is beyond honoured after scooping his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor for his role in The Banshees of Inisherin. The Banshees got 9 of her 14 nominations. Louise Ryan from Screen Ireland says investment in the film industry here is paying off.
I suppose as amongst the best in the world, really, is what we're talking about here. I mean, it's really testament to the support, I suppose, that that kind of long-term sustained investment in talent across directing, writing, and producing, and that in turn creates these huge opportunities for cast and for all of those who work behind the scenes as well.
That's it for now. More news in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Make the most of Paddy's weekend with a Ryanair low fares break to Bologna, Lisbon or Madrid.
It'll be dry and cloudy for many areas tonight with highs of 8 degrees Celsius. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Yeah, there was a lovely moment earlier on today. Kathy Smart in Dundalk was at home with her 4 kids when she became the biggest ever winner of a cash prize on Irish radio when she answered our call. The cash machine has been reloaded tonight, and this is the new number, the new total that you need to know. Jot it down wherever you need to. €20,318.61. 20,318.61. Text play to 57557. That's play to 57557. Get your entry in by 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Then across the Go Loud network of stations, Barry Dunn is going to be making another call. If your phone rings, answer it within 5 rings and tell him the exact amount in euro and cent, and you'll win that in cold hard cash. So remember that amount, €20,318.61. It's over 18s only to enter. Text cost €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. And you're playing across the Go Loud network of stations. And terms and conditions are available on newstalk.com.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. The Premier League is back. Watch every live game for the rest of the season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along to Tuesday night's football show. Richie McCormack here with you tonight until 10 p.m. Second half is nearly getting underway. There was 5 minutes of added time at St Mary's in the first leg of the Carabao Cup quarter-final. Southampton 0, Newcastle 0. The biggest incident, I suppose, in the first half being Nick Pope coming out and clearing out Moussa Gineppo and nearly knocking the poor devil out as well. Scoreless it remains, though, at St Mary's as we await the second half to get underway. We'll be talking Juventus with Daniele Fisichella and the latest scandal engulfing the Bianconeri and their 15-point deduction in Serie A. That's all to come in this hour. But Dan McDonnell joins us in studio tonight, and we've just been commenting on how well Charlie O'Leary looks, because Paul McGrath has tweeted out a photo in the last few minutes of himself meeting up with Charlie O'Leary. You might remember him, the diminutive kit man for the classic Charlton years of the Republic of Ireland. 99 next week, according to Paul, will Charlie be, and looks remarkably well, remarkably fit and healthy. And yeah, just an incredible character, you were saying off air in terms of football.
Yeah, he would have been at the Soccer Writers Awards dinner, which was the weekend before last, and he sort of his life in football. People talk about, and very naturally, as you do, the go-to line is Charlie O'Leary is, Jack Charlton's kit man, and sort of this figure around the camp beloved. They met the Pope, and he was sort of to the fore, but he was also a referee. He played, and then he was a referee at various levels. He was, heavily involved in sort of administration in terms of the Leinster FA. I did a piece a while back before Christmas for the FA Cup final last year, actually. A very sad story in 1997 it was, when Conor O'Dowd, the brother of the then Derry City keeper Tony, passed away before the cup final. And Tony Senior and like Greg would have played League of Ireland, one of the other sons, like a big League of Ireland family. I was just chatting away to doing a piece about that very, very difficult time in their life. And Tony Senior mentioned it was Charlie O'Leary who helped them at that stage, got him involved in football administration, and just someone whose name just comes up in a lot of different contexts, not just sort of in the most obvious way that you mentioned there, but incredible, like fighting fit. I spoke to him. This is the thing, like I spoke to him a couple of years back during COVID for a piece, and I actually can't remember 100% of what it was about, but he probably would remember more so than me. Like, he's really sharp, remains incredibly sharp. I think it probably would have been around the time that Jack Charlton passed away, obviously, and getting some of his recollections.
He'd won a lifetime achievement kind of thing from the FAI, or been, I think, awarded something like that around that time too, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah, no, he is just an extraordinary character. And sort of, it's great to see him with Paul McGrath, and for all that, in some ways, and I would say this myself sometimes, like, we remain in the sort of the shadow of Italia 90 nostalgia sometimes when we talk about football in this country and debate where we are today, and it's almost unfair sometimes. It's hanging over. It's still like, for people of a certain age who are now lucky enough to almost remember it all, you just see that photo and you think,
yeah, it's lovely. It's a lovely picture, by the way. Paul McGrath's tweeted it out. Vincent Hogan has retweeted it as well this evening. We'll go to a good news story, I think, start with last night. Well, not good news if you're an Aberdeen supporter, or indeed for the managerial prospects of what was described as potentially a future Republic of Ireland manager. Well, it's certainly a dark moment for him, but a lovely moment in the history of Darvel, who operate out of the Lowland League in Scotland, and knocked out Aberdeen out of the Scottish Cup last night with a 1-0 victory. Yeah,
the sixth tier. Yeah, are they even like?
I don't think it's Lowland League actually. I think
no. Lowland is the
next tier up. They missed out on that. It's the West of Scotland League Premier Division.
Yeah, because apparently the Lowland League in Scotland is full of like reserve teams, and there's some it's excluding. Darvel, I think, actually a little bit better than their status would suggest, but it seems like there's some mad Scottish football bureaucracy or something that prevents them from getting the promotion that they should. But still, I mean, and this is a town of a very small population, a team with like a stand with 60 or 80 seats or something, who beat Aberdeen. And Aberdeen are a club with a proper fan base. They had 700 travelling fans, and I think they're describing it. It's more probably from maybe a betting perspective. People try and judge this now like the biggest shock in the history of the Scottish Cup. Like, incredible. And I mean, we are talking about it here. What drew me to it, unfortunately, was the fact that Jim Goodwin is the manager. He has the old the Wikipedia Jim can't buy a win, as he was changed at one point last night. And it's in that, because like Scotland can be relentlessly, like Scotland can be really cruel. Like the Scottish media spotlight, when it goes against you, can be particularly harsh. And we've had several Irish managers go over from here. Stephen Kenny, like Pat Fenlon, who probably experienced that side of things at times. I mean, how they cover their football there is intense. Like, we might think, it's just Celtic and Rangers, but it's not. Like, if you're in Scotland, there's blanket coverage of other teams, in particular the likes of Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts. So
that next tranche down from the top.
Yeah, so for them to lose to a team like that is sort of unthinkable. It's sort of unthinkable. Like, I remember Aberdeen when they lost to Bows, which is a fond recollection for yourself. Back in 2001, was it maybe? And like that was, I remember the huge travelling support in Dublin, and like the expectancy was massive. And but for poor old Jim Goodwin, who went from St Mirren to Aberdeen, it was a sort of a making that step upwards. Like, very impressive character. I think he's been on this show before.
Had done very well at St Mirren.
He was at Alloa, like as a part-time sort of football manager for a while in the Scottish, their third division effectively, and built himself up and was on this trajectory. But sometimes you see, I think in Scotland you do get to that, and this isn't to excuse him at all. He's obviously under a bit of pressure, big time, but you probably get to those slightly bigger clubs, but then, okay, how much can you do? So you have to do exceptionally well maybe to really enhance your reputation, as some managers have. But for whatever reason, at Aberdeen, it just doesn't seem to be clicking. They lost 5-0 the weekend, And just reading the Scottish press stuff last night, it's almost, the line was, you just can't recover from this. Like, you just cannot recover.
It almost has that air of when Celtic lost to Inverness, Caledonian Thistle.
Yes.
In that was the seen as a bottoming out point for Celtic at that point, and that there was no recovery. I think John Barnes was in charge at the time.
I think you're right. Was that the John Barnes sort of Kenny Dalglish sort of team?
And it felt like that was as low as it was going to get, and there was going to be no.
Yeah, and like Aberdeen, I think they have been up around the top half of the table, but they're just, I mean, they seem to be toiling of late. And yeah, like I suppose, I mean, I sort of mentioned, like you mentioned someone like Stephen Kenny or whatever. Like, I suppose part of the managerial experience is to fail at a club. Yeah. You know, sometimes they say, like, when your graph has been going up and up and up and up and up, then like sometimes this is the real like character building experience. But I mean, it's just a catastrophically bad thing to happen. And just looking at the pitch, the surroundings, I mean, maybe you watch football here, maybe it's not that bad really, like we're used to sort of looking at idiosyncratic grounds, but like, yeah, for them it's as low as it gets, and it's it's punch bag territory.
1 win and 9 for Aberdeen now at this stage. Their only victory recently coming in the Premier Division against St Johnstone. They are 5th, which isn't disastrous entirely, but when you're in that rut, it is very difficult to see how that kind of run of games and run of defeats, as it has been 3 in a row now, kind of comes to a close. Yeah,
and just reading the reports as well, like you lose 5-0 the weekend, I think it was the Hearts, and then it's a case of, okay, you know, give us your reaction to this, and you appear to be outworked by a team, a pretty modest team. It's just of all the countries for it to happen, you know, you just like if he's managing a team in League One and a Stars on the rise, and okay, you're knocked out of the FA Cup by a team non-league. Yeah, it's bad. But it's another level. It's like national scrutiny there. Yeah. Like this morning in Scotland, they are the laughing stock, and you are the face of that, and like that's tough. Yeah, having a scan on social media there, it seems to be a case of they're kind of waiting for the axe to fall on Jim Goodwin. But on the other side of that, of course, a fantastic moment from Mick Kennedy, and actually Mick Kennedy, the Darvel manager, his pre-match speech was caught by the microphones and indeed the press just before kick-off last night in that Scottish Cup tie.
The next 90 minutes will probably be the most important 90 minutes in your career. All right? I read up today that the average man lives to about 77. Right? 40 million minutes in his life. All right? I'm asking you to give your absolute utmost for the next 90. 90 minutes out of 40 million. Right? That's all I'm asking for. So when that whistle goes, be prepared to give everything you've got for each other, for yourself, for your family. Be proud of what you achieved and be proud of what we're going to achieve. Because I promise you right now, we can win this. But it's about belief. That belief starts inside yourself, then it spreads through one another. But you must believe. People talk about underdogs. I'm telling you right now, we're no underdogs. I do not believe it. I've never believed it till the draw's been done. Because I know what's in this change room. I know what's in your hearts. I know when we're together, we can achieve it and we set our mind to it. But you've got to be hungry. You've got to have the desire in your belly. You've got to draw strength for the crowd. You've got to drop for one another. When you need to find that extra yard, that extra bit of oxygen, then look around about you. Look to your brothers. Look to your family. Let's look to the next round. Let's go. Go on.
Is it any wonder they went out and beat Aberdeen after that?
Speech. Sort of Braveheart-esque, really, isn't it?
Anthony in the Scottish accent.
Yeah, it just makes you think, like 40 million minutes. Yeah.
And here's 60 minutes of them, Dan.
Yeah.
Me and you.
Think of how many minutes you spend queuing.
I don't. It's stuff like that genuine
queuing.
Bothering you.
I
stood behind somebody who can't use a self-service till. In
like I just think now the amount of minutes you spend agonising over just being frustrated by things that happen in Irish football. Like that definitely. Like I'm going to add up those minutes at some stage and go. Just like, I mean, obviously, you know, you do care about this, but like. If I ever saw a stat tally of those minutes, it would just be like, God.
I feel like Mick Kennedy's speech is after triggering an existential crisis.
I think he's clearly not with his team. His team was
within you though.
His team managed to focus on the next 90 minutes, whereas everyone else listening is thinking,
what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
I'm not beating Aberdeen.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that should open some doors for him. That speech there,
100%. Yeah.
I mean, have you noticed this though lately? Like, there's definitely a lot more. We're getting a lot more of this
access stuff.
Access, yeah. I kind of wonder, is it the? I think the lads were talking about it here recently. It's the whole like spate of like the Drive to Survive, and then it's spanning out from, or like the Arsenal, the Sunderland. There's different versions. Some more controlled than others. Some better than others. But it's almost a thing now where it's like, I feel like there's actually a more media friendly outlook from a lot of people now because they realise it can be good for them.
100%. We're not playing that audio though, and we never hear about the microphones being in the Darvel dressing room if Aberdeen go out and spank them 5-1 last night.
Well, this is it. Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose they did do it across the water sometimes as well, don't they? In the sort of lower league games, like they actually do mic up the dressing rooms and stuff, and it's always the non-league stuff. I think on BT occasionally you get a little bit of that, but that's no harm. Yeah, worked out well for them.
Falkirk next for them in the Scottish Cup for Darvel. We'll keep a look out for the results. Speaking of moments,
second best 90 minutes of your life, obviously, is Falkirk.
Speaking of minutes spent and dedicated to other causes that you care about, you're at the FAI AGM at the weekend, Dan.
Well, there's some of those minutes, yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose I've spent more minutes. I mean, in a bygone era, you would spend a lot of minutes at an FAI AGM that you'll never get back, where there was actually nothing happened, other than the sort of call to prayer style bugle, which was just to go for lunch, and that was basically it.
What was for lunch?
Well, we didn't get it at the time. This is back in the day. Maybe they did let us have lunch. We weren't allowed to ask questions. And there was a couple of AGMs where we were brought in through an elaborate sort of we couldn't walk through the main doors of the hotel, so we had to be met by a security man at a special door who brought us in. It was like a sort of a Spinal Tap thing.
Well, you couldn't risk making eye contact with the people at the top table back then.
It wasn't even. I mean, it's one thing not being allowed to make eye contact with the top table, but if you're not allowed to speak to like the delegate from, I don't know, like sort of pick the smallest league affiliate in the country you can find, who'd probably be quite happy to like talk to anyone really at this stage, but clearly they might have caught something. So it's a different thing now. There was like this was actually a resumed AGM, as I think you had the pleasure.
The third go, I think, of this.
You had the pleasure of covering the first part of it, which was beset by.
No, the second part.
The second part.
Well, like the first part was essentially they weren't able to come to an agreement about how they were going to meet their gender quota, which was obviously a condition of their reinstatement of funding from the government. So the second part of that was to try and get the election happening of a new independent directors, and that was beset by a complete technical farce whereby everybody was asked to vote by email, and the email system that they were using for the votes was just not working. And it's like, I haven't received my email. And it's basically a Teams chat was scrolling in front of me of a lot of people going, I didn't get it.
Yeah, it sounded a bit like sort of people doing a Zoom during COVID, like a big family thing or something.
It was even worse than that.
People for the first time sort of embracing some of this technology. Like it was an absolute disaster.
Completely.
And then they had to resume it again. So it was on Saturday in Dublin. 100 or so people participated, but some of them were online. Most of them were in the room. There was a couple of, as you mentioned, one new person onto the board, Niamh Matinee, and then there was the ratification of 3 others. And you sort of I assumed that might be routine enough, but then there was a couple of speeches which showed there was a bit of discord in the schoolboy football world, and Tom Brown, without getting bogged down into it, like Tom Brown, their delegate, lost 46-44. So I think I can't. Someone was talking after, when was the last time you were at an FAI AGM where someone like lost to the room? Normally like it would be, yes, there's been the election in recent times for a couple of positions, but just someone losing to we're not having you. That was unusual. As I said after, bit of democracy. You could just taste the democracy in the air. just wafted in.
As we all know, Dan, democracy has its downsides. But one of them, I'd say that facetiously, obviously, but one of the issues that you raised,
important clarification in FEI context.
One of those issues that you raised, was it on Saturday itself or maybe on Friday, was about the composition of the board and the needs to have gender balance, which obviously is an important thing. But the way this is shaken out from an FAI perspective, is very lopsided.
Yeah, and like, definitely have to be careful how you phrase this, because it's not as if, I'm not saying like, I'm against the concept of a gender balanced board. Like, it was obviously very important that changes like that were brought in. I think the timescale, you would have to say, is possibly a little bit unrealistic in the, to look at the sort of the ecosystem where Irish football is at the moment. Unfortunately, you have you don't have that representation down through the committee channels or the sort of the constituencies feeding into it. And I understand the argument for, okay, but you still have to meet this target at the top level. But actually, the target was meant to be met all the way down, and they're just sort of getting it through at board level, which is very cosmetic.
Yeah.
But then you will have, without again getting into it, you have the board, which is the main FAI decision-making committee, but you have ones below it which are very influential. Some of them have no women on it at all. So that's not. So then you say, well, we've better gender talent, gender targets in some ways, and we'll all maybe talk about the headline news and okay, fair play to them. They're getting ahead of the game, and actually, it's not really reflective of what's happening. And also, you have a situation, and this is sort of the central point of the piece, where they need effectively 5 board members to be female, and they have elected 1 on the football side of the house, because it's 6 independent and 6 football elected.
Family. Yeah.
1 from the football. It was Niamh O'Mahony. He was only elected on Saturday. And they have 2 females already, independent directors, Catherine Guy and Liz Joyce. But with Roy Barrett and Gary Tubick stepping away, and because there's no eagerness, it would appear, on the other side of the football family for people to step down to make way for female representation there. Although it's possible there could be an opportunity now with Tom Brown losing his seat. It's created a situation where they're going to look for independent directors, and they have to be female to meet the quota, which to me doesn't really make sense, because I think, to have a sort of a gender balance within the association, I think to have it on the football side, but the concept of independent directors is you go out into the market to see, okay, who can we find that's completely independent, that can have the skill set to come in for us, and you're sort of going into that with your hands slightly tied a bit, in the sense of saying, well, we can only, this is open, but actually only to female candidates. And like, that sounds, even if you say that out loud, you think that sounds bad in a way, but I think that's not surely what that side of the house should exist for. And you may end up getting 4 females and you end up 7 and 5, balance the other way, that's fine. But I think to present an image of the message is really hitting home about the need to have representation all the way up. The balance should be on the football side rather than just filling up the independent side with women, just to tick that box in a way. That's how it appears to me. And I think there would be, and then you sort of hear people talking cynically, and this is the thing, they're like, well, maybe, I've spoken to people who admit that this is a discussion. It's like, well, when you think about it, like, maybe a great way to have your interests represented on the board now would be to elect a female in your constituency.
Yeah.
And that's also the wrong mindset. And it just speaks to the classic FAI thing that still exists, that you talk to people around Irish football administration, and it's all very much about people's patch and their power, and not willing to cede their ground in their area. Well, if we have, our person there, they'll do something for us, rather than being this big collective. And like, that is, that's Irish life.
That's Irish politics.
That's Irish life. It's Irish politics. It exists everywhere, but it feels quite pronounced in the FAI when we, there's so many big things that people just can't agree on at underage football. A lot of things that need to be done in the next decade. A lot of it comes down to, well, what are they getting that we're not getting, and suspicion and paranoia and a degree of that, and that isn't gone.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes a little issue like this can sometimes just be a microcosm of the broader one.
Must be something interesting for the likes of Scott Canham and for
Mark Canham,
and for Jonathan Hill, who come in from the outsides to deal through those weeds and try to bash through them. On a similar domestic front, there was your story today as well, that I don't know how much of a runner this was to begin with, about Anthony Barry and a potential return for him not being on the cards, but also I guess the important side of things is that Stephen Rice perhaps isn't getting off.
I think the Anthony Barry thing was a runner. No, it was. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it was something that had been, I think, discussed seriously enough, and I think there was sort of a feeling that Anthony Barry might have been up for it, but when it's come to the crunch, it's decided not to go for it. Will it be that he ends up in Portugal with Roberto Martinez? It's possible. I think that's a possible scenario, and that's, you're competing with at a pretty attractive gig there potentially.
Working on set pieces with Ruben Diaz and Pepe.
Yeah, I mean, well, is Pepe still going? I mean,
he was at the World Cup for sure.
I know, yeah, because he got another campaign on him. He probably does. I mean, there is Ronaldo as well, and a couple of those. But yeah, Stephen Rice then, the chief scout analyst, he was on the shortlist for the Swindon Town job, but basically doesn't appear to have got that job. So that means that, he's around. So I think that they will replace Anthony Barry / John Eustace. That number 3 spot will be filled.
Before March?
Before March, yeah. I think certainly all the vibes are that will be the case. If that's not the case, it'll be hard for them to sort of present it as this was always the plan. I think it was actually said at the weekend at the FAI event that no, there will be a number 3 in, and sort of I'm getting the feeling it may not be too far away.
Was Barry then part of was there obviously a group of, similar to the way Swindon, I guess, we're picking out a new manager, that Rice was part of the consideration process? Is Barry one of a number, or was he the standout candidate and then there's...
I think if Barry was willing to come back, he'd be in.
Straight back in.
He'd be back in.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because there's no introductions to be done. Like, it's not ideal. I mean, what I think they would probably feel sometimes, you get that sense from what Stephen Kenny has said before, there might be too much focus on the staff, and there's no doubt that, like, Anthony Barry coming in, not having to know, like, knowing everyone pretty much already is a huge advantage. It's not ideal for players to meet a new coach on the training ground at a very important time. So the power of someone's personality needs to be very strong to sort of overcome that.
Finally, from the FAI standpoint, they have a couple of big commercial deals. Do they have any real timeline in the offing as regards when? Because in that previous attempt at the AGM before Christmas, I think it would have been, obviously at this stage, they were saying that the commercial deal in place for the kit supplier was the biggest commercial deal that the association has ever done on any front. So it's a huge thing, but they've also got the rebrands tied into that too.
Yeah, hugely excited about. I'm not like sort of, some people are big into their kits, and you possibly are as well. Like, you strike me as someone who could be an aficionado in that world.
Calling me a nerd on air, then that's fine.
That's one person's nerd is another person's aficionado, whatever. But like, they have been talking in excited terms about this. The expectation is that it's going to be a Castori. It's not confirmed, and they refused to confirm it. They were certainly in the mix. And yeah, they seem very excited about this deal, and that's going to be tied in with a rebrand, with a new
crest
logo, a new crest. And I mean, people are so relentlessly sort of skeptical of the FAI and everything that they do. I feel like this is going to be a default mode of mocking this, regardless of whether it's good or not.
Nobody can ever launch a new logo or a new brand identity like that, and it will be universal. It won't be ever universally accepted, no matter who it is. It could be, I don't know, it could be AIB, it could be ourselves, it could be the FAI, it could be Lions Tea. Whoever puts out a new brand, like most people, the vocal element will be like, don't like it, it's awful.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any affection for the current one?
No, and it's not just because it's I won't say associated with a bad period in Irish football, but there's nothing. It's a very corporate looking logo, and the fact that whoever designed it knocked one up for Israel in the same afternoon, that kind of takes away from it too.
It feels like it belongs on a shirt in the 2000s. Definitely, it has that sort of vibe off it.
And it's been there. Like, I think people forget that it's been there a while, and even the ones that people would regard as classics, the circular, the orange outline, wasn't it, with the green shamrock and football. So that was only brought in like the mid 80s. I want to say the 86, no, 88 Euro 88 qualification campaign probably was the day before that.
This is where the kit nerds come to the fore. I don't have a great recall.
There was different versions of it. There was like the shamrock, and then there was a weird version in around the time that they had that quote unquote Kerry jersey for one international, and
but there's no doubt there's less is more with that to some degree now. I think that's. I think if they're reading the room, and even the success of that blue shirt, that sort of special edition shirt a couple of years back, people want that sort of style.
Minimalism.
Yeah.
Minimalism is always good.
That's what they'll go for.
And cash is the most important thing here, though, really.
It does, though. I mean, you just can't get away from it. I mean, like, sometimes I complain about the excessive focus in a way of, like, you can't just all rely on, like, qualifying for tournaments, but ultimately, like, that is the main driver of revenue, is qualifying for competition. And beyond that, the only way you can sort of paper over the cracks of not doing that is like incredibly strong, commercial.
Well, that's the one thing that struck me
deals.
from that statement. That I think it was Roy Barrett that mentioned it, and perhaps it was Jerry McEnany. So forgive me, it was definitely one of the two because they were on that conference call afterwards. But when they said that this was actually, it was Jonathan Hill, when they said that this was the biggest commercial deal ever done, I was kind of thinking, all right, that's great. And then my head was thinking, what the hell was the commercial department, if there is one there, doing prior to them?
Well, I think one of the things and this is why the search for the men's team sponsor has become a bit of an issue for them, was I think initially when people came in there, they felt that the value of the deal they had previously with Three, they felt they could maybe get more, in the market for it. And it clearly felt it was underperforming in some ways relative to, say, other things. And this goes back to like the Delaney era FAI, where obviously very centrally controlled, and every deal was packaged as a great deal. And maybe people would step back from it and go, well, were all of those deals really great deals? Were you really doing great deals there at all? But unfortunately now, the fact they haven't been able to secure a men's team sponsor, I think they probably went looking for too much relative to maybe what they thought it could be worth initially. And now they're in a situation where they're very much talking in positive terms about, well, this kit deal is going to be transformative. And these are big words to be using for, to an audience who are just used to Irish football being broke because of years what happened. So people will naturally, they don't want to hear this is transformative. It's reducing the debt burden. They want to feel like they're seeing something from this too.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure all will be revealed before France roll into town. Indeed, was it Latvia before then as well? Or
Latvia, which the Evan Ferguson factor could make that a better event than people would have thought when it was announced. I think how many people will go and see Evan Ferguson play now if they know he's starting? I think more people will go to that game than would have been thinking of going to it.
All I'm hearing is, Dan, we're winning the Euros in 2024.
Yeah,
it's a nailed on fact. Football brought to you by Sky here on Off the Ball. Watch all the football you love, including the biggest Premier League games every weekend, live on Sky. We should mention it is still scoreless with 18 minutes to play at St Mary's. Southampton 0, Newcastle 0. Joe Linton has missed an absolute sitter for Newcastle, and since then Southampton have probably had the balance of the play and indeed the chances. Dan, thanks so much for coming in.
No worries.
We're going to be talking Juventus with Daniele Fisichella after this.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk.